Nyeba gunle namdol shing yende gunje gemba sunje gunje nyen chego tamje ken la gun chan se. So today I will try to explain the three ways or three kinds of methods or the techniques that we use to practice, especially the technique for meditating, or when we you can say the three ways of balancing our mind when our mind becomes strongly imbalanced by many reasons. So in the meditation instructions, it is said that when we meditate, of course, is dealing with our mind in general, but especially sometimes we might have this strong certain emotional disturbances. It might be our old habit, it might be because of certain conditions. So when we have this certain overwhelming, imbalanced emotional ups and downs, such as strong anger, strong attachment, or strong anxiety, fear, depression. So these the three methods or three ways to deal with is the first one is trying to understand the environment of these emotions and trying to see it through the objectively, not subjective point of view, because mostly when something happens, our subjective minds becomes very excited, very disappointed, not being objective. It will exaggerate it or it will denigrate it, and then it will strongly triggers our excitements or the disappointments. The first one is so understanding the situation objectively, not to become a victim or the what you call the manipulated by situation, so to speak. Not governed by the situation, but looking the situation as it is, not exaggerating it. And of course, when we understand the environment, the situation, then we can also look at, so what are the causes and conditions that is triggering this emotion. So you look at unbiasedly causes and conditions, and by eliminating the causes and conditions, especially through seeing it objectively without exaggeration, you will come to the realist, how to say, you will react through the realist way to the situation rather than the subjective way of looking at it and then making something unrealistic or irrational. So the first one is that understanding the situation and not exaggerating it, and then trying to eliminate those causes and conditions, and through that you try to eliminate this let's say anger, so you look at the situation, its cause and conditions, and you eliminate the cause and conditions, and your anger will reduce. So there's lots of observing, self-observing is needed there. The second is that so there are certain things usually in the traditionally we say that when we practice the meditation and then you wanted to eliminate our disturbing emotions, and there are two kind of methods. Certain kind of methods that you can apply, it will reduce your disturbing emotions, but it won't go very deep, so it will not be able to eliminate it from the root, but it will definitely reduce it. For example, when you get sick, there are some medicines, they can reduce the symptom, right? But still you need the proper medicine in order to cure from the root. You need other medicine on top of that. Similarly, when we practice, that's why we always talk about this, two paths. Path of accumulation, the path of wisdom. Actually, it is like this. All the path of accumulations that we practice, these are very much a strong medicine that will really reduces our obscurations and emotions. But still, since it's not a wisdom orientated, we still need a wisdom in order to eliminate it. So the process is that you start with focusing on these techniques which reduces, and then eventually at the end you go to the wisdom method which will eliminates it from the root. So for example, our mind, the good news about mind is that we only have one mind. So that means most of the time mind can only be function as in the one kind of nature. So that means if I'm feeling compassionate, I cannot feel anger. So these are two opposite minds. It's almost like when there's a light, it automatically reduces or eliminates the darkness. And when there's darkness, the other way. So there are many techniques. When you apply that kind of techniques, like when you get angry, and what is the opposite of anger? Loving kindness or compassion. So we apply the loving kindness and compassion in order to reduce. This context we can say eliminate anger, but in reality it will reduce it, but still there will be a subtle kind of clinging to there. But it's okay to start with there. And there's another practice such as is that, okay, so you get angry, and then instead of applying this opposite emotions, you just look at the nature of anger, and through seeing the reality of anger as an emptiness, and that is, you're not applying any other thoughts, you're just looking itself, and it will also can be dismantle this anger through doing that. So that will be the wisdom orientated. But for the beginners, mostly it is suggested that we practice this applying the opposite emotions. Because when you are angry and then suddenly practicing anger as an emptiness is very relevant, not very relevant, and it's hard to do that. Maybe you can do eventually, but for the beginners it's hard. But the problem is that if you always rely on this opposite thought, then it's hard to get rid out of this clinging. So for example, you apply compassion to the anger, but then the compassion will be somehow left there, clinging to the compassion. So there will be kind of like a subtle side effect, so to speak. And to get rid out of that subtle side effect, you still need the practice of wisdom at the end. So these three methods or the three modes are kind of that process. It goes like that. So first of all, there are certain things which really triggers. So first of all, it's important to find out our own burden, so to speak, right? So not everyone is same. People have a different patterns or personality. So some people have more anger issues. Some people have maybe attachment. Some people anxiety. Some people are think too far, always worried about future, maybe grandchildren. Some people are too short, only think about today. So both becomes extremes, and it might create a different kind of sensitivities in our emotions. The first thing, important thing is that find out what is our burden, really. You have to do certain introspection, but with very observing, right? Actually, if you can trace back what people tells you, especially the close ones, maybe our parents, our friends, and then you can see a little bit of your pattern. If your friends tell you that you talk too much, then there must be a reason why they say that. Or if your friends or someone tells you, oh, you are so grumpy, there must be a reason. So they are actually a good kind of source, data source, in order to understand what is your pattern, especially from those honest people who really tells you what's your problem. So, because then you can be more clear, you can be more, because you can narrow down, whenever the problem happens, you can narrow down, because otherwise it's too much. You don't know what is happening. And if you know, oh, okay, I'm anger-oriented person, and something happens, oh yeah, anger, you can immediately pinpoint and focus on that instead of going through all the other things. And also, our emotions are triggered by our sense, right? And people have a different and sensitivity of their sense. Some people are very sensitive to sound, you get very irritated from the sound. And some people are very sensitive to the form, color, shape. Some people are very sensitive about being clean, hygiene. And some people are very sensitive about their looks. So you have to also find out which these senses is your burden. Is it a sound? It is a smell? It is a texture? Or something like that. What I'm trying to say is that the first thing is, if you wanted to eliminate these imbalanced emotions, you have to find out what are the causes and conditions. So all these could be the causes of conditions. Now once you find out, oh, I'm this oriented person and I'm sensitive to this, and then you can deal it with easily. And you also know that once you understand what is your problem, then you can also understand what is the remedy that I have to apply, that I have to focus on. Then it might have some general patterns, but it might also depends on the different time and the conditions, where you are, who you are with, all these kind of things. And usually, again, because our disturbing emotions are triggered by our habit and the object and the incorrect perception, so to speak, right? So when these three things comes up, it will really trigger. It's just like a perfect recipe for the overwhelming emotions. Now, good thing is that you cannot completely get rid of the object, but you can change a lot this correct perception, these reactions. Because at the end, emotion is nothing but the reaction. It's not the object. It's putting anger into our head, right? It is our reaction towards the object that is the anger. That's what disturbs us. Even though we say the object disturbs us, but it is just a condition. For example, if I see the enemies, we can say, yeah, because of this enemy I got angry. But then in reality, yeah, he was just a condition. Yeah? But it didn't that he came and put anger into our head. Yeah, it's not. Because I react certain way, which is incorrect way in this context, because it brings disturbances. So when you change your reaction, and then you can also change the object. Now, this is the second practice, that transforming condition as unfavorable condition as a favorable condition. Now, mostly there are many reasons how we incorrectly perceive the object, like the mistaken rope as a snake is getting scared. It's exactly the same, whether it is attachment or anger. So this incorrect happens several reasons, but there's two, I think, strong reasons. Is that the taking the object as a permanent. So it means that whether it is object of aversion, or whether it is object of attachment, or whether it is condition, situation of anxiety, right? The first thing what comes into our mind is that this is forever. And the more you have this, you have a more strong emotional reactions. For example, it's very unlikely to get very angry from the strangers, right? You might fight, whatever, but it comes, we can let go. But if you know somebody for a long time and who is going to be with you for a long time, and something happens, it's very hard to let go of that anger. Why? The reason is that since you know this person, and the moment you get aversion or angry from that person, immediately, let's say if you say something very simple thing and I didn't like it, I get angry. But I don't look at it from that way. Immediately I will exaggerate it and say, oh, he hurt me last time. He hurting me right now. Definitely he will hurt me in the future. So you go in this past, future, and then it really triggers your emotion. Maybe you might be thinking, oh, he might hurt my children, grandchildren, back up our mind, which are very unrealistic. See, incorrect perception, and then see, I'm not looking at objectively. I'm just putting my own subjective view and trying to put that on the object, translate from that way. So this is one. And similarly, for example, why we get attached to something very strongly is that, oh, this will be always nice, this will be always beautiful, yeah? And then let's say you have a friend and he helps you, and he is helping me, and he will definitely help me in the future. So this, we put all this past plus present plus future, and then this attachment becomes very strong. Again, almost like there's a certain kind of this very naive, permanent expectation and hope and permanent fear, not understanding the permanent, impermanent. And also this is one main reason why when we have this anxiety, fear, emotion, it lasts very long, even though in reality condition might be go, but it still keeps in our mind that it's going to happen, it will happen again, or it's very likely to happen, or it will never end, it will always be like this. So all these exaggerations. So this seeing correctly is very, very important, objectively, not putting your own subjective interpretations to the situation or the object. Second thing, again, we make a mistake, is disregarding the dependent, rule of dependent. Yeah. For example, not seeing things as independent, but just blaming one thing and say, oh, this was the reason for this happened. And more you have that singularity, this individual, this independent view, it's stronger the emotional reaction. So what I mean is that, let's say somebody says something to us again, right? And then more you think like, wow, he independently, individually, intentionally said that to hurt me, in order to hurt me, the stronger that you have, you get very strong reaction. Now if you look the situation, for example, even ourselves, because you can just copy, because if you look at in your own experience, will you ever hurt somebody intentionally, with your own independent control? No, right? We don't do that. It just happens out of our emotion, out of our habits, out of our anger, out of our jealousy. And this is same with the other persons when they hurt. So it's not that someone is hurting you intentionally. You have to understand that there might be many other reasons. Maybe he's hungry, or maybe he didn't like the color you wear, or maybe he just came from this meeting. There must be many reasons. And also, of course, he's very much controlled by his disturbing emotions, egos, and probably nobody really happily, intentionally hurts anyone. It just happens through the power of condition. So when you look at from that, and looking at from the dependence point of view, and actually, it is a condition for my anger, but it's not that bad, It just something just happened. And also, he did hurt me, but there's nothing guaranteed that he will hurt me again. There's no reason to be thinking like he will definitely hurt me again in the future, and then really clinging on it and not being able to let go, holding on it, like locking it. So these two sort of incorrect view or incorrect perception through the exaggeration of our own disturbing emotions, and just blurs the situation, and you don't see the reality, and then you exaggerate it, and then it, all this chain of negative thoughts will follow. Oh, this happens, oh, that happens, oh, that might happen, and all these negatives will come up. And that is exactly what anxiety, continuous fear of the negative thoughts, irrational fears about future. And so these are some causes and the condition that we can analyze it and see. This is we call the analytical meditation, and then become a little bit aware, and then particularly whenever you get some strong imbalance emotional, immediately you can say, oh, it's coming from this cause, or it's coming from this condition, or am I being influenced by this subjective, emotional, or I'm trying to look at objective. Am I being rational, or am I being just carried away by this negative thought loops? Because mostly when it happens, you cannot observe it, it just carried away. So not carried away by that thought chain is some kind of important techniques or the tools that you can be prepared. Then of course the main two tools is that mindfulness, being aware, and then conscientiousness. So mindfulness is more like being aware what is happening, and the conscientiousness is more like repeatedly monitoring. Am I doing it? And as I said before, if you practice mind-body practice, remember, doing, if you're eating, it's quite helpful, because then your mind doesn't have a time to do anything else because you're eating. So it closes lots of doors for this mental chattering, mental roaming, because you're already occupied. So it is a kind of, you can call it the mindfulness practice. And then you can choose a particular set of tools, based on, as I say, your problem. For example, I'm sensitive to colors and shapes, right? So I have to be careful with the colors and shapes. It could be the object. It could easily manipulate me. It could easily influence me to see the way I wanted to see subjectively, and not seeing, blurring this objective reality. And or it could also be the object of my anger, So, and then maybe someone we have, then I can create my own kind of set of techniques to deal with this. And one, I think, when we practice in general, especially the meditation, problem is that if you are perfectionist, it will be quite difficult, because you feel like, I want to study about meditation, everything, then I will study perfect meditation. Right? It means you will never gonna meditate. And that's in general, but in meditation it happens a lot. Especially if you are perfectionist, when you meditate, all you see is you are doing wrong, or the fault. The problem is that it is actually it is a result of self contemplation, but then it seems like it's a kind of like a fault. It's like you can say actually it's a good side effect of meditation. Getting a little bit disappointed at the beginning. It's like when you take medicine, right? And then some medicines, it will show some sort of symptoms, like medicine is fighting with disease at the 1 week or 2 weeks. It's a good, If there's nothing happening, that means medicine is not really fighting with the disease. There's something like that. And then if you are very sensitive, and if you want it to be like everything to happen very quickly, you just stop doing it. That's the big problem. So what I'm trying to say is that don't have a big picture of meditation. Don't have a big, beautiful picture of meditation or perfect, Otherwise it will be very difficult. So it will be more like big versus small, It will be more like, okay, I will do it. Of course, you need to have some basic ideas, Then, well, let's see, I will do it and see what happens, So you learn, and you have to have that trust, faith. It's like learning how to cook, right, or how to drive. You read all the driving books and say, okay, so I will drive it perfectly at the beginning, otherwise I don't give up, then you will never learn how to drive, right? You can read book and you do this, you do that, but then you have to have this faith in yourself. You have to have this patience, You have to have this tolerance. So what I'm trying to say is that don't have this fancy, big, perfect picture of meditation. It will just ruin. Have a very simple, practical, and okay, I will put this, one small things are big, one day, and then just meditate 5 minutes, and being able to do 5 minutes itself, taking it as a result of meditation, instead of thinking good meditation, because there's no good meditation, bad meditation. When you learn how to drive, do you have a bad driving, good driving? No, you're just learning. So good and bad only happens later as a result of that. So having that kind of view, courage, and the patience is very important. And as I say, continuity. Continuity is important. So it's kind of like, because meditation is very much you do, and then you see and you learn. It's not like you study and you do in one day everything will be happen like like how you turn on the bulb and all the emotions will gone. It's not really like that, It's a very process. And also, because I think if you're a perfectionist, or if you have that kind of anxiety of, you are very scared to do mistake, right? If you have also that, you don't want to make any mistakes, and it's very difficult. It means that you don't want to learn, you just want to be a expert meditation, you don't want to meditate as a path. Because meditation is like making mistakes, and then learning from that. And of course, Meditation is very much like how you, not, yeah, dealing with mind is very much like exactly how good parent deals with his children, how you deal with children very softly when he's just baby born, and then what kind of foods you should feed their children, and then slowly this children evolves, becomes teenager, and you cannot still feed the same food, same, you have to teach them a little bit differently, you have to be a little bit hard, and then also you have to take care of them, but at the same time you have to give them a space to grow up, isn't it, when he's 15 and 16. Otherwise you can say out of compassion you how to say, you, what is the English word to
Smother.
Smother, yeah, smother too much in the name of love, and then the children will become like grown up children. You never grow up. So you also, it's exactly the same. We have to be careful, but then also sometimes we have to give them a chance to experiment, chance to be just a little bit wild in a way, not always putting into this cage. Then it will become like more brainwashing your mind, not like nurturing, maturing your mind. And exactly, meditation is actually nothing but your mind is becoming more and more mature, independent, like how your children grow up, knows what right, knows how to deal with all the problems. Exactly the same way. So I think if you have a children, it will be very good for you to just use that skill to your mind. Just to mature your mind. So these are the some general methods or the techniques that we should embrace or practice in order to balance our mind, so to speak. And I was mostly talking about the first one because first is the what we have to focus on. It's creating the proper environment and eliminating all this unfavorable environment in order to balance our mind. And second is mostly the second technique is that let's say I have certain kind of emotional, and first of all, again, trying to come out of that emotional and knowing this is my emotion, this is my thought, yeah, you coming out of it instead of being that, because otherwise you can absorb it, you will be carried away. Once you come out of it, you can observe it. And now, it doesn't really matter whether it is good emotion, bad emotion is okay, but just transforming, meaning the using that emotion as the tools, as the object of our meditation. So for example, if you get angry, that's fine. Instead of having, oh, anger, oh no, instead of, okay, instead of carrying away by that anger, you just keep that anger, so to speak, and then you can, okay, I have an anger, fine, because of causes and conditions, nothing to blame on, dependent origination, and now you can use this anger, instead of eliminating it, you can transform that anger as a means to purification. So let's say I'm having anger, or let's say I'm having anxiety. Oh, this anxiety acting like nothing. It's just having some kind of emotions, right? That's it. Don't label it as anxiety, depression, or we give all these fancy names to our emotions. All these are just your own, again, subjective exaggeration levels. Just look at it as, okay, it's normal, emotional ups and downs, imbalance. Now, of course, it might be not a pleasure feeling, emotion. So we can kind of think that, oh, now you can change a little bit of your practice from the general shamatha to the mind training practice or bodhicitta's practice, right? And like it says in the Bodhicitta Avatara, fine, this is an opportunity. May all my own past anger, future anger, as well as all the people's anger, because nobody wants to anger, nobody wants to disturb, be dissolved into this anger and be cease as soon as possible. So that you are really focusing on this anger. So the anger is doing nothing, see? It's kind of like going round and round and round. But at the same time, this energy is becoming a slowly positive energy. You're using anger. Anger is not harming you, not harming anyone else. It transforms into the positive. And after that you get it. Because when you do that, then anger becomes useless, He's like a virus, he wants to be multiplied, but when you do that, he stops there. There's nowhere to go. And then it just transforms into some sort of like practice. We call it the using unfavorable condition as the fuel to your practice. It is compassion. And it's free. You didn't have to buy anger or ask somebody can you give me, I need to practice. Right? But this is one way to do it. Instead of having this very kind of like what do you call the tensions towards this emotion, embracing it and then transforming it into something good. It's like you can deal with your enemy by fighting him, or you can let's talk, why we hurt each other. Maybe you do this, I do this, you're also happy, I'm also happy, something like that. So solving the problem through the shaking the hand, so to speak, rather than destroying each other. So the third is almost like the result and a very wisdom oriented practice, and we might be able to do it eventually, but we have to try right now. Even it is just conceptually, it is a more presumption kind of wisdom, emptiness, that's fine. That's how it's just imitation, that's fine, but we have to, at the end, practice that. Because it is very, it doesn't have any side effects. So then when we get angry, not thinking too much, just looking what is angry. Don't thinking too much, is it good, is it bad, what is the result, not, but just looking at this emotion or the thought, what it is, where it arises, where it remains, and where it ceases. And when you just observe it, it will just dissolve by itself. And that's how nature of thoughts. And when it dissolves, it means that if there's nothing to be angry, then who gets angry, So this is almost like our result. But we have to focus on the first, second. And because when we talk about this kind of practice and we say, if there's nothing to be practiced on, then why we put effort, right? We might think like that. This is exactly